Oikein hyvää tiistai-iltapäivää ja tervetuloa Taideyliopiston YouTube-kanavalle ja suoraan lähetykseen. Tänään ollaan Seinäjoella kulttuuri- ja taidekeskus Kalevan navetassa, sen Huuko-salissa. Niin ikään tänään ollaan myös etäyhteydellä yhteyksiä sitten tämänpäiväisen luennoitsijaan Helsingissä. Elikkä näin aikoina käytämme etäyhteyksiä kaikessa toiminnassa ja myös tämänkin seminaarin tai tiedetiistain luenton järjestämisessä. Taideyliopiston Sibeliusakatemian Seinäjoen yksikkö päätti tänä keväänä siirtää toimintaansa omalta osaltaan pienesti myös tänne verkkoon. Tavallinen opetus, kurssit, konsertit, seminaarit, festivaalit, kaikkihan peruttiin, niin ajattelimme, että meidänkin on ilo kantaa kortemme kekoon ja tuoda tiedettä ja taidetta sinne kotisohville tai kotitoimistolle tai ylipäänsä verkon välityksellä, missä kukakin teistä nyt sitten haluaa näitä seurata. Taideyliopiston Sibeliusakatemiasta Seinäjoella tehdään kaikenlaista tutkimuskehittämistoimintaa, taiteellista toimintaa, lyhytkursseja. Vähän pienessä mittakaavassa kaikkea sitä, mitä Taideyliopistossa muutenkin tehdään. Ja tämänpäiväisessä tiedetiistain puheenvuorossa meillä on äänessä filosofian tohtori, musiikin tutkimuksen ja kaupunkitutkimuksen dosentti Giacomo Bottàn. Hän on työskennellyt meillä nyt itse asiassa noin puolen vuoden ajan Taideyliopiston yhteistyössä Live Fin ry:n kanssa toteuttamassa erässä elävän musiikin hankkeessa. Ja sitä kautta sitten tänään hänen puheenvuoronsa tuli ajankohtaiseksi ja käsittelee tosiaan teemaa, mikä merkitys musiikilla on kriisiaikoina. Ja tämä päivä otsikko onkin Music in Times of Crisis. Tämä ihan juuri kohta aloittava luento-osuus, puheenvuoro, on englanniksi, mutta esitysmateriaalista löytyy myös suomennettuja osia. Ja teillä on tietysti sitten koko ajan mahdollisuus, hyvät seuraajat, niin siellä YouTube-kanavan kommenttiosiossa sitten esittää havaintoja, kysymyksiä ja kommentteja, joihin sitten palataan tämän esityksen jälkeen. Mutta nyt pitemmittä puheitta siirrymme verkon välityksellä Kehä kolmosen sisäpuolelle ja meillä on Giacomo valmistautunut tähän puheenvuoroon. Ja,
Okay.
Olkaa hyvä ja Giacomo, ole hyvä.
Kiitos. Thank you, Mika, for this introduction. And today I'm going to talk about music in times of crisis. And I'm very honored to be here. And I've been looking with great interest at the lecture by Antti Ville and then at the two fantastic concerts by Antti Paalanen and by Pia Klemola-Välimäki. And it's fascinating because all these three events have been made possible by this crisis, so to say. So it's very interesting how the crisis sort of brought into the Seinäjoki unit a lot of like creative solutions, which sort of gave way to very interesting events. And I think my event is here at last to try to make a bit of sense of why we are not there with you in that fantastic concert room of the Kalevan navetta in Seinäjoki, and why am I now sitting in my cellar in Helsinki. But to start the lecture, I think it's important to think a bit about times of crisis and about what a crisis exactly might be. Of course, a crisis is something which is very complex. There are, first of all, a variety of different crises which might happen. But most important is to understand that a crisis happens only in relation to something which is in its nature already complex. For example, if my bicycle breaks, I cannot say that my bicycle went into a crisis, because a bicycle is a pretty simple mechanism. But if we think in terms of, for example, the human body, the human psychic life, if we think about communities, if we think about societies, we're talking about something which is highly complex and therefore prone to enter into a crisis, be it a political crisis, an existential crisis, um, a health crisis like we are living right now, or an economic crisis. And it's also interesting because sometimes these crises are also, so to say, multi-layered, which means that what is happening nowadays in terms of the epidemic as consequences which will bring to an economic crisis, and in some countries maybe to even to a political crisis. And very interesting is also the fact that crisis can make sense in different and in countries. We explain what happens, or the way that we explain the causes of what is going on can be very, very different. So times of crisis can be described as being unstable, as being disruptive, meaning that something really breaks down, as being uncertain about the entity of the crisis, about the consequences, about the duration of a crisis. A crisis is also often unexpected. We didn't see it coming, so to say. And there is this continuous atmosphere of being in something which is not normal. And a question that we hear a lot today is when we will go back to normal. So there's this idea of a crisis being also like something which is abnormal. And of course, we can talk about individual or collective crisis. But what does music has to do with this, and why to tackle music into a crisis? Well, here I'm following what Jacques Attali, who's like a French political economist and philosopher, wrote in his book Noise, the political economy of music, where in this book he suggests that music sort of anticipates change. So music as a cultural and social practice has some emancipatory potential. It's able to sort of show how things outside music will go. So most of the time, listening might tell us more than looking, and also in the case of this crisis, maybe like tackling and examining music can tell us something about the nature of the crisis or the way we understand the crisis. And in doing this, I'm will start with a quote from Bertolt Brecht, like a German playwright and poet who lived between in two very distinctive eras in three different eras of German history, starting his career in the Weimar Republic. And as soon as Adolf Hitler took power in 1933, Bertolt Brecht left Germany and moved to first to Denmark and to a city called Svendborg. And in Svendborg, he started writing some poetry where he tried to make sense about the German crisis. And this series of poems, which were published later on as the Svendborg poems, there's a motto, and the motto is here. So the motto is like very short kind of text at the beginning of a poem where Brecht wrote, in the dark times, will there also be singing? Yes, there will also be singing about the dark times. So it's very interesting. It's a sort of inner dialogue. There's this uncertainty if like, will there be music in the dark times, so during a crisis? And the answer that Brecht gives is yes, there will be, but it will be about the dark times. So my lecture today is structured in two, so to say. First, I will think about music in the dark times, and then I will think about music about the dark times. Of course, knowing that in the end they sort of bundle together. But for me, it's interesting first to think about what is the role of music in the dark times, and I will try to tackle this with two questions. So what do we listen to during a crisis? And what is the function of music? And why music takes up that particular function in the dark times? And I have three examples that I will make. And after having made these three examples, I will try to sort of answer these two questions about music in crisis, music in the dark times. And the first example I make is connected to an epidemic, not the current one, but the one which happened in 1918, which got the international name the Spanish flu, and killed from 50 to 100 million people around the world in that year, and I think between 1918 and 1919, so right after the First World War. And it's called the Spanish flu because it was first detected in Spain. But in Spain itself, the Spanish flu, it's called Soldado de Nápoles, which means the Naples soldier, or it was called like that on the Spanish media during the time. And the Naples soldier is a popular song, like a musical number from a 1918 zarzuela entitled La Canción del Olvido. A zarzuela is a sort of musical comedy. And this musical comedy, La Canción del Olvido, had nothing to do with the flu. And the Naples soldier was a song which had nothing to do with the flu. However, it became a sort of nickname for the flu, for the influenza, because the song was as catchy as the disease. So there's this idea that like it was so easy to get hooked by this song in a way which was so similar to get hooked on this kind of terrible influenza. And this is something which is quite fascinating, and I will talk more later about this. But now let's keep this information here. The second example I want to make, it's Capri Fischer. It's a Schlager, like a German hit, sort of song from popular music written in 1943 and recorded by Magda Hein in a version with a female voice and by Rudi Schurike in a version with a male voice. So the song was recorded and was ready to enter the German music market in 1943. But in 1943 is the year when Capri was liberated from the Nazi fascism by the American army. So in Nazi Germany, a song about Capri became taboo. Therefore, the song was not released. But at the same time, the records were stored in a place which had not been bombed. So in 1945, when Germany was basically in completely destroyed in rubble, and the Nazi had been defeated, the song became one of the first post-war hit singles. So the record could be distributed to radios, and radios could play that song. And the song is a very, very simple, innocuous song about escapism in a sort of southern imaginary landscape by the sea, far away in the south of Italy, where men are going out fishing and women are longing for them to come back. So this is another example of a song which became very relevant in a moment of crisis. The third example I want to make is not about a particular song, but it's about contemporary playlists on Spotify. I had a look at, I made a small search about COVID-19 playlists, and it's very interesting. There are plenty of playlists. Some are like mood playlists about, helping you working or helping you doing some workout in the quarantine. Some of them are very humorous because they sort of activate song titles. There are songs called like Toxic, Can Touch This, Fever, and they're all songs that of course acquire a whole new sort of meaning if they are put in a playlist called COVID-19. Or there's a list called Sneezed on the Beat and the Beat Got COVID-19. Of course, there's also a lot of catchy songs, and there's also, again, this metaphor about catchiness, about music as something which is catchy but doesn't kill you. And of course, on Spotify, it's also nowadays more and more easy to find bands or songs called COVID-19. So it has also become a sort of mythical brand. It plays a function which has basically nothing to do anymore with the virus itself. So these three examples sort of have something in common, and they sort of help me try to answer the questions I put in the beginning. So in the dark times, what do we listen to? Well, we listen to basically anything as long as it is catchy. There's this idea of like something which might help us escape, for example, something which might give us some positive vibes, so to say, and something which also gives us some kind of comfort. So if we have to answer, so what function does music take up and why? I would say that it's like comfort, like, when comfort, like in comfort food, comfort food, something we eat that sort of provides us at the same time, like, warmth, pleasure, something very easy, something that sort of can help us, can cheer us up somehow, and so on. And this brings me to like a third statement here, that like popular music and popular culture in general is also a sort of safe way to make sense and provide imaginary explanations, imaginary solutions. So for example, in the first example I made about the Napolitan soldier, the fact that, I mean, the joke that like the song is as catchy as the disease, and then the disease getting this name in the name of the song in the media is also something which provides a very easy explanation. For example, in the fact that the Spanish the Napolitan soldier is someone from abroad. It's like from Napoli, so from Italy, not from Spain. So it's sort of externalizing the disease through music. And although, as said before, the song has absolutely nothing to do with the disease. It's something which has been built at the mediatic level and at the level of me. So this is just some statements about, what is the role of music in the dark times. But then this idea of that Brecht brings upon of music about the dark times. So it's very important for me also to think about what kind of music originates in times of crisis, and what relation does this music develop with place, for example. If music which originate in the crisis always implies sort of political criticism, engagement in social justice, or not. And the last point is what happens to this music after the crisis. So what happens to music which has a strong bond to a specific hard time? What happened to that music after the crisis? And here I will also have some examples to answer these questions. And the first relates to something I've been studying a lot in the past, the idea of deindustrialization and music. In the late 1970s, in the so-called Western world, there was a huge paradigm change in the organization of work. There's the rise of neoliberalism. There's the end of Fordist production, and there's the introduction of more flexible industrial production. Of course, in the 1970s, we also have the first real strong economic crisis after the one which happened in the 1920s. And there's also an era of unemployment. So this is like the industrialization is very much connected to a crisis. And for me, it's interesting because I've been studying industrial cities and what happened in industrial cities when they lost their industrial power. And once industrial work lost meaning, music offered a new paradigm for self-development, both at the individual level and at the communitarian level. And it is quite easy to see a growth of music scenes across industrial cities, which were sort of talking about the crisis in lyrics, in design, meaning say like in record covers or in pictures, and from the point of view of the sound, which sometimes started working with the idea of an industrial soundscape. And I'm talking about music scenes such as, for example, punk, hip hop was also born in the same era, and heavy metal, which the names itself tells about something industrial. Music definitely, and then electronic music, which will develop then into techno and house. These are all sort of products of a crisis. All these music genres. And this crisis, of course, has also a very important element, which is empty industrial spaces. So once the industrialization took over, the industry left a lot of cities around Europe and left a lot of empty industrial spaces. And it's very interesting, during the crisis, we get this concept of dancing in empty industrial spaces, which like would sound pretty bizarre, but it's very much embedded into contemporary clubbing from very early. The word discotheque itself, it's a French word, because the first events where people were dancing to recorded music, to records, happened in Paris during the Nazi occupation, where people were dancing to forbidden jazz records in cellars, and they called these cellars with records, they started calling them discotheque. So dancing has always had something to do with resistance, with empowerment, and at the same time, of course, with joy. When you dance, you are sort of happy. And during the deindustrialization crisis, as said, techno and house music were born in places like Chicago and Detroit, and they're very much connected to establishing safe spaces for LGBT, Black and Latino minorities in these empty warehouses. But Chicago and Detroit are cities which were deeply industrial and which suffered a lot due to the industrialization. And so at the same time, we see a sort of connection between certain dance cultures being born and a crisis which had a very material impact on cities with this idea of empty warehouses. But the examples I made are about music, which happens, music sort of about the crisis and dancing to the crisis. What I said, the last question I had was like, what happens to these crisis music genres after the crisis? And this is a point which I find very important. It's very much connected to the fact that music sort of is very important in providing, like sort of in working with nostalgia. And this nostalgia plays out in relation to certain places. So if nowadays we all understand that, like, we all like to spend times in empty factories, where we can find a restaurant, a theater, we can even find a place where we work in non-industrial work. So it's a lot of them became also offices. And my idea is that sort of this crisis music sort of translated this idea of these places as being something positive and creative. And this gives a lot of power, I think, to music. So music is very much able to curate spaces and to create a certain atmosphere, which can be then used for other means, of course. But it's also interesting the way crisis music was more and more recognized as heritage and memory. Antiville was talking about heritage in his lecture. But there are more and more museum exhibitions about punk, about techno. There are museums being opened only about techno music. There's a tourism which is connected to these music genres. And there's plenty of research being done in university about this kind of genres of music born in the crisis. So the empty warehouses where the places where music cultures was able to grow, and of course they also nowadays provide something else to people. But my idea in the end, so to conclude this lecture, is that music in crisis, music about the crisis, it has worked as an active agent of change. It has been very important in providing new creative means to get over the crisis. And however, the potential that music has, of course, can be tamed once a crisis is over, and it's something that we might have seen in the last years. So music becoming more and more bound to a system which is very, very fragile and which sort of collapsed with the ongoing crisis. But on the other hand, about the ongoing crisis, I also want to say something very, very briefly, is that the ongoing crisis made us all stay at home. So we are sort of living in a very highly connected domestic sphere. We are all here. I'm here in my home, but often music sort of provides an imaginary substitution, so ersatz space. For example, through streaming. So streaming has become a very powerful substitute to live gigs today. Or then it also provides like a sort of sonic substitution space. For example, with what is going on in Italy and France, especially, where people are playing music from their balconies. The balcony is this space which is between your domestic space and the public, and with music, basically, you reach out what you cannot reach out with your body, because you cannot move outside. You reach out with music, and therefore music becomes this substitute for your bodily presence in space. So I think this is a very important function that music is playing right now. And I wanted to conclude this small talk with this, because I find it is like a sort of message of hope somehow. So thank you.
No niin. Kiitos Giacomo. Oli todella mielenkiintoinen katsaus siihen, mikä on niin kulttuuri ja musiikin merkitys näinä aikoina. Ja kyllähän tämä sillä tavalla ajatellen, että kuinka merkittävä rooli kulttuuritapahtumilla, musiikkitapahtumilla, niillä kokemuksilla meille on. Ja nyt kun me ollaan tämmöisessä living labissa, että meiltä tavallaan on viety kaikki kulttuuritapahtumat ja kohtaamiset, niin kyllähän tämä on aikamoinen muutos meille kaikille. Ja nyt samalla voi huomata sitten, että kuinka paljon musiikin tekijät on nopeasti löytynyt uusia tapoja striimata asioita verkossa, järjestää uudenlaisia tapahtumia. Esimerkkinä vaikkapa eilinen veteraanipäivä, missä oli iso kuoro esitti Finlandian, joka oli tehty verkon välityksellä, oliko siinä useita satoja, tämä virtuaalikuoro. Että kyllä musiikin ja kulttuurin voima ja merkitys on kumminkin näinäkin aikoina jotenkin korostuu, ja niin kuin kerroitkin, että se jotenkin, siinä on monta eri tasoa, in many ways, by making music, by listening music, and by finding meanings, how the music helps us.
Yeah.
Oikeastaan menisin takaisin. Joo, oli hyvä.
Yeah, that's a very, very important point, this idea of resourcefulness, and the resourcefulness we find in times of crisis, and music is really showing exactly that. So the speed of the reaction has been impressive, definitely. Yeah.
Sanoit tuossa esityksen alkupuolella, että tämä kuinka musiikki ennakoi muutosta, how the music anticipates the change. Could you tell a little bit more about that?
Yeah.
Open that
that's an interesting. It's an interesting idea that of course it's not mine, but like how the organization of music as I mean the production, the consumption of music sort of anticipates changes in society, something that we've seen, for example, with the idea, for example, at the moment a lot of us work in precarious jobs. They work like, you know, in Finnish and in English we call it the gig economy, and the gig economy is something that musicians have been doing for a long time. This idea that like, okay, so I have a project like a record, I finish a record, and then I tour and I get paid by each gig I can get, and it's something that musicians were doing and we were not. We were working 9 to 5 in our jobs, and then in the last 20 to 30 years, the whole of society has turned basically into a kind of organization of work which is very similar to the one which started in music. So this is one example of the way sort of music anticipated a sort of flexibilization of work, which then got bigger.
Juuri näin, joo, kyllä. Sitten minkä tuolta kans mielenkiintoisen kohdan, mistä voisi muutaman sanan vaihtaa lisää, it's the semiotic of the song titles.
Yeah, it's
onko tosiaan niin, että sitten jo biisien nimetkin tavallaan liittyy siihen, että biisien nimien, tai se mitä me kuunnellaan, niin me haetaan biisejä, mitkä on tietyn nimisiä. Oliko tähän tutkimustietoa? Did you find the research on that we do search for music by titles.
Yeah. Well, that's something which of course it's very much connected to the idea of creating playlists, and playlists have been there before digitalization and Spotify. Of course, we all made playlists on. We all recorded the compilation cassettes with songs, and these cassettes often had a meaning. For example, you made a cassette, a playlist on a cassette for a particular trip, or to sort of to create like a sort of memory in the same way that you do when you for example try to build a photo album, and it works in the same way. So of course songs carry different meanings for different people, or can be enhanced and by certain kind of meanings in certain kind of contexts. But what I find it interesting, this idea that like this COVID playlists were very much connected to sort of they were humorous. So that there's this idea that like if you know the title of the list, then you get all the references and you can laugh. But maybe if you don't, then it's more difficult to understand what is it all about, what links all these songs. And that's quite interesting, and I think that's again it's a way to provide not a solution, but a way to provide something in a crisis, something which can make us sort of think, reflect, or which can help us escape the reality of the epidemic in this case.
Nyt meillä on pari kysymystä täällä YouTube-kanavalla.
Okay, I can see them in the chat.
Täällä ensin kiitetään. How do you see the economic shift in music during the time of crisis? At the moment we see big and small artists offering concerts streamed for free. Kind of music as charity.
Well, that's of course something complicated, because I mean, for some big artists, streaming can be just a sort of marketing stunt, a way to brand yourself, and just a way to keep you on top, so to say, keep you in the charts. So if you're streaming, and if you're streaming from home, and there's also all these ideas about the fact that through streaming we can also enter the house of this superstar of pop music and see how their houses look like. So there's also a kind of voyeurism involved in that. But for several less successful artists, or for several artists who basically live only thanks to live music, this streaming might be a way to really get some like help in life, in the absence of everything else. So I think it's somehow very, very split, the way streaming works, and of course a lot of streaming nowadays in the last weeks has been also to support clubs, not to support artists, and that's also very important. That like artists sometimes play for free to save the club, so that the club can then give them the opportunity to play in the future. So there's a variety of reasons why to stream music today. So it's either branding yourself and giving you some publicity. It's like giving you some money to help you in your everyday, or like helping a club stay alive, so that you can later play in that club. And so therefore you help the whole ecosystem. So there are like different perspectives. So it's quite fascinating what is going on.
Joo, nythän on siis niin, että on niin monenlaista, että on moni striimaa ihan ilmaisia projekteja, sitten on vapaaehtoiseen maksuun perustuvia keikkoja tai klubien tukemista tai niin, että tuetaan järjestäjää tai sitten artistille suoraan, mutta sitten on ihan siis maksullisia keikkoja. Ja kyllähän tämä niin kuin, tietysti jos tämä tilanne pitkittyy ja jatkuu, niin pakkohan tästäkin on löytää sitten ansaintalogiikkaa ja mahdollisuuksia. Ja niinhän se, koska nyt on jo huomaa sitten, että myös niin kuin feikkisivustot ja huijarit on jo liikkeellä, että on jo tapauksia, missä sitten on niin kuin yritetty päästä näistä tilanteista osingolle. Täällä on seuraava kysymys. Many people are getting tired of the COVID-19 situation and to what it does to our everyday. How does this fit with the nostalgia associated with COVID playlists, for example, or does it?
Yeah, that's a good point, because it's true that in a lot of these playlists we find songs from the 80s or from the 90s, or some songs which connects to our past, to our childhood, to our teenage years, and so on. And that's, I think, an important point, because there's also one big issue is that, of course, during a crisis you tend to see the past as something which was perfect, and therefore when you listen to songs from when you go back to the 80s and you're basically associating them with something which is lost because it's in the past, but that it was perfect, and that gives you sort of hope that like your future will be as perfect as your imaginary past. And of course maybe and of course the fact that like these playlists are imbued in this nostalgia is very much an effect of these, I think. Yeah.
Hyvä, kiitos.
Thank you. Kiitos.
Täällä nyt ei ole tullut meille lisää kysymyksiä ja voidaan vähitellen lopettamaan tämän tiedetiistain osuutta, ellei sulla, Giacomo, vielä tule kohta mieleen jotakin, mitä haluat sanoa, mutta kyllähän varmaan niin juuri näin, että oli se tapa mikä tahansa käyttää tai kokea tai olla sen musiikin tekijänä tai kokijana näinä aikoina, niin on se sitten joko maksullista tai maksutonta, mutta tietysti se, että paras palkinto musiikin tekijöille on se, että me seurataan ja kuunnellaan niitä keikkoja, oli ne sitten maksullisia tai maksuttomia, ja löydetään musiikista lohtua ja apua arkeemme, ja sitten toisaalta myös sitten kun taas päästään keikoille ja tapahtumiin, niin sitten myös tehdään sitä ja käytetään mahdollisuuksiamme tukea ja käyttää musiikkia.
Yeah.
Ostaa lippuja keikoille ja tukea paikallisia keikkojen järjestäjiäkin. Mutta jos ei nyt enää sulla, Giacomo, mitään loppusanaa. Kiitos.
No,
kiitos.
I mean, your words were very nice in the end. I perfectly agree with you. So let's try to support music, and because it is getting us through these times, so it's very important to do that. Yeah.
Oikein lämmin kiitos, Giacomo, hyvästä luennosta tänään. Ja Taidepiston YouTube-kanavalla löytyy kaikenlaista myös tulevaisuudessa. Kiitos teille ja oikein hyvää tiistain jatkoa.